The hostess at the front podium looked me up and down the way people do when they've already decided you don't belong somewhere. It was that slow, deliberate scan starting at my winter boots, moving up to my coat, which, yes, was a puffer jacket from MEC, and not exactly what people typically wore to a private dining event at a place like Harlow's. And then she smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach anywhere near the eyes. "The staff entrance is around back," she said. Through the alley, past the loading dock. I stood there for a second. "Just a second. I'm a guest," I said. "My brother's rehearsal dinner. The Whitmore party." She typed something, looked at her screen, typed again. I don't see a... Oh, here it is. She said it like she was disappointed to find my name there. "Right this way." I followed her in and thought, well, this is going to be an interesting evening. My brother Theo had been with his fiancée Camille for 3 years. Camille was lovely, genuinely warm and funny, and the kind of person who remembered your coffee order from 6 months ago. Her family, however, her family was a different situation entirely. Her mother, who I had been introduced to twice before and who had forgotten my name both times, was standing near the bar when I walked in. She was wearing a silk blouse the color of a stormy lake, and she had the posture of someone who had spent decades reminding rooms that she was the most important person in them. She saw me come in. She looked at my coat. She turned back to her champagne. Her father shook Theo's hand for the 3rd time in a row, the way men do when they want to establish something. Her aunt, who had flown in from Vancouver, was holding court near the window, telling a story that made everyone around her laugh too loudly. And then there was the restaurant itself. Harlow's had been mine for 4 years. Before that, it was a failing steakhouse with water damage behind the drywall and a kitchen that the health inspector had very strong feelings about. I bought it at 28 with money I had been saving since I was 19, working doubles at a diner in Kanata, then managing a catering company, then consulting for restaurant groups across Ontario. I gutted it. I rebuilt it. I hired a chef named Kwame, who had trained in Montreal and Lyon, and who made a potato leek soup that had been written up in Toronto Life twice. I named it after my grandmother, whose middle name was Harlow, and who made the best butter tarts in Renfrew County, and who never once in her life let anyone make her feel small. Nobody at this dinner knew any of that. Theo knew, obviously, but Theo had been so nervous about the rehearsal dinner going smoothly, so eager to manage every variable, that when I told him I owned Harlow's, he had said, "Oh wow, that's so great. Can we just not make it a thing tonight?" Camille's mom is already stressed about the seating chart, so we didn't make it a thing. I was just Theo's younger sister who worked in the restaurant industry, which, in Camille's family's vocabulary, seemed to translate roughly to waitress. I had arrived early to check in with my floor manager, Jules, who had been running the front of house since we opened. Jules knew. Kwame knew. A few of the senior staff knew. We had a plan, which was mostly just, I'd have dinner, I'd enjoy my brother's rehearsal, and nobody needed to know anything. That plan lasted until Camille's mother decided she had opinions about the menu. It started small. She flagged down a server, a young woman named Preeti who had been working at Harlow's for 2 years and who was, frankly, exceptional, and told her that the amuse-bouche was not quite right. Preeti smiled and asked if she could bring something else. Camille's mother said she wanted to speak to whoever was in charge of the kitchen. Kwame came out. He was gracious and calm, and he explained the dish. Camille's mother listened to about 40% of what he said and then announced that she had a sensitivity to a particular spice, one that was not in the dish, and that she was surprised a restaurant of this caliber hadn't thought to ask about dietary restrictions in advance. We had asked. The form had been sent 3 weeks ago. Her daughter had filled it out. Kwame nodded, offered to adjust the dish. She waved him off like she was done with the subject, and then turned to the woman beside her and said, loudly enough for the table to hear, "You'd think they'd be more careful." I watched this from across the room. I was sitting between Theo and one of his friends from university, and I had a glass of Riesling from a winery in Niagara-on-the-Lake that I had chosen personally for this dinner, and I was doing the thing I have always been good at, staying very, very still. She's a lot, Theo's friend said quietly. She's nervous, I said, which was probably too generous, but I was trying. The first course went fine. The second course was when things started unraveling. Camille's aunt, the one from Vancouver, had apparently decided somewhere between the appetizer and the main that I was the right audience for her opinions. She had found out, through some dinner table archaeology, that I worked in restaurants, and she leaned toward me with the energy of someone who considered themselves an expert in everything. "It's a sweet industry," she said, in the tone people use when they mean the opposite. "Very hard to make money in, though. Most places close within the first year, you know. It's not a sustainable career, really. You'd do better in something more stable. Have you thought about going back to school?" I was 32. I had a business degree from Carleton, a culinary management certificate, and 4 years of running a restaurant that had been profitable since its 14th month. But I smiled and said, "I've thought about it." "Camille's cousin is in finance," she continued. "Bay Street. Now that's where the real money is." I said. "What exactly do you do? Are you front of house? Something like that?" She nodded like this confirmed something. "Theo's done well for himself. Camille's family has really taken to him." She paused. "It's lovely that you could be here to support him." Support him? Like I was a cousin who had driven in from Sudbury to clap at appropriate moments. I excused myself shortly after to check on something in the back. Jules met me near the service station, away from the dining room. "Everything okay out there?" Jules asked. "Wonderful," I said. "How's the kitchen? Kwame's having a moment about the sauce reduction, but it'll be fine. You okay?" "I'm great," I said. And I meant it mostly. There's a particular kind of peace that comes from knowing something that the room doesn't. It's not smug, or it doesn't have to be. It's more like patience with a very clear expiration date. I went back to the table. The main course arrived, and Camille's mother decided, somewhere between the first and second bite of her duck confit, that she wanted to rearrange the seating for the actual wedding reception. Not discuss it, rearrange it. Right now, at the rehearsal dinner, in the middle of the entree, she produced a handwritten chart from her purse, an actual physical chart, folded in quarters, and began laying out her reasoning. The problem, as she explained it, was that Theo's side of the family needed to be managed. Her exact word, managed. She said it while looking at no one in particular, but she was sitting 3 feet away from me, so some of Theo's people are a bit. She paused, searching for the word. Informal. We don't want the energy of the reception to feel mismatched. Theo was doing the thing where he looked at his bread plate very intently. Camille looked mortified. She said, "Mom," in a voice that had years of practice in it. Her mother said, "I'm just being practical, sweetheart." I took a sip of wine. The aunt from Vancouver said, "It's really about the photographs. You want the photographs to look cohesive." I thought about my grandmother, about how she used to say, in her particular way, that the only people who worried about looking cohesive were people who had nothing more interesting to offer. She was right about most things. Then Camille's mother said something that I still think about. Not because it was the worst thing she said that evening, but because of how casually she said it. She was explaining that she wanted the reception at a different venue, not Harlow's, which had been the plan for the past 4 months, because she had heard things about the management and she wasn't sure the staff were up to the standard the occasion required. Camille's father nodded. The aunt from Vancouver said she'd had a similar concern. Theo finally looked up from his bread plate. I set down my wine glass. "What things did you hear?" I asked. Camille's mother looked at me like she was surprised I was still in the room. "Sorry. About the management here." "What things did you hear?" She did the slow blink thing. "I just mean, for a wedding, you want somewhere with a real track record, an established name. Somewhere with, a certain level of—" She gestured vaguely at the room. "There are better options in the city." "Like where?" She named a hotel downtown. "A fine hotel. Also more expensive, also already booked for most of next year, but fine." "Harlow's has hosted 47 private events in the past 18 months, I said. "The average feedback score from those events is 4.9 out of 5. We've been reviewed in Toronto Life, the Globe and Mail, and we were shortlisted for the Open Table Diner's Choice Award for private dining in Ontario last spring. I paused. I'm curious what you heard, specifically. The table had gone a little quiet. Camille's mother tilted her head. And you know all this because… Because I own it, I said. There are moments in life that are completely, utterly silent, and yet, somehow, the loudest thing you've ever experienced. This was one of them. The aunt from Vancouver said, I'm sorry, Harlow's, I own it, have for 4 years. I picked up my wine glass again. The staff are exceptional. Priyethi, who you sent back to the kitchen twice tonight, has been with us since we opened, and she is one of the best servers I have ever seen work a room. Kwame has trained in Montreal and Lyon, and the duck you just ate took him 3 weeks to develop. And Jules? I nodded toward the front of house, where Jules was quietly, professionally pretending not to have heard any of this, has kept this place running through a renovation, a pandemic-era reopening, and whatever tonight turns out to be. Camille's mother opened her mouth. Closed it. Theo was staring at me. His expression was complicated, somewhere between mortified and something else. Something that looked, if I had to name it, like relief. I didn't know, Camille's mother said finally. I know you didn't, I said, and I wasn't unkind when I said it. I genuinely wasn't, but I wanted you to. Camille reached across the table and touched my hand. She had tears in her eyes, which I had not anticipated and which almost broke me. I'm so sorry, she said quietly. I'm so sorry. You have nothing to be sorry for, I told her. And I meant that too. Her mother was quiet for a very long time. The aunt from Vancouver had discovered something fascinating in her water glass. Camille's father cleared his throat and said, to no one, that the duck really was excellent. Theo laughed. It started small, and then it didn't. He put his hand over his mouth and his shoulders shook, and finally he just laughed openly, and the tension in the room cracked like ice in April. I signaled Jules, and Jules, because Jules is a professional and a genius, appeared within 30 seconds with a dessert course that had not been on the original menu, a maple creme brulee that Kwame had been developing for the spring menu and that we had decided, quietly, to debut tonight. Just in case, the table ate in the careful, fragile peace that follows a reckoning. Camille's mother did not bring up the venue change again. She did not produce the seating chart. She ate her creme brulee, and she said to the air in front of her that it was very good, which was the closest she was going to get to an apology, and I accepted it. After dinner, I found Prethi near the service station. You were wonderful tonight, I said. She looked a little surprised. It was a complicated table. You handled it perfectly. I'm adding a note to your file. And I'm giving you next Saturday off, paid, because you've worked 6 weekends in a row, and that's not right. She smiled. A real one, the kind people do when they're not expecting something. Thank you. I found Jules next. You owe me nothing, Jules said before I could speak. This was genuinely the most entertainment I've had on a Friday in months. I'm buying you breakfast tomorrow. You're buying me breakfast and telling me everything she said before I got there. Deal. I went back to the dining room. Theo was standing near the window, looking out of the street. It was February, and there was snow coming down in the particular Toronto way. Sideways, illuminated orange under the streetlights. He heard me come up beside him. You okay? I said. I should have said something, he said. Earlier, when she said, the managing thing. I should have said something? Yeah, I said. You probably should have. He nodded. Accepted that. I'm going to do better. I know you are. He put his arm around my shoulders the way he used to when we were kids, and something had gone wrong and we were figuring out what to do about it together. She's not. Camille is not her mother. I know that too, I said. Camille is great. I like Camille very much. But her mother is a person who has spent a long time in rooms where no one pushed back, I said. That's fixable. Probably. We stood there for a while. The snow kept coming down. Inside, behind us, I could hear the sound of the tables starting to loosen. Chairs shifting, voices dropping into something more comfortable. The particular acoustic of a room that has moved from tension into something it might eventually call warmth. Quame came out of the kitchen around 10, the way he always does when service winds down, to check on the room. He saw me standing with Theo and gave me the small nod that means everything went fine. The kitchen is happy. The night held together. I nodded back. There's a thing that happens sometimes. At the end of a long night in a restaurant you've built from nothing, when the last guests are finishing their coffee and the kitchen is cleaning down and the floor staff are finally getting to breathe, where you feel the weight and the lightness of it simultaneously, all the decisions you made, all the things that could have gone wrong and didn't, all the people who showed up and did their jobs and made the thing work, I felt that, standing there. I thought about the hostess at the front podium. I had spoken to Jules about her earlier in the evening, not to report anything, but to flag it. Jules already knew. She's been doing that, Jules said. I've been keeping an eye on it. We would address it properly. There would be a conversation. There would be a conversation. There would be coaching. I was not interested in firing someone for a bad habit if a conversation could change it. But I was also not in the business of letting bad habits continue unchecked. Nobody on my team was going to make a guest feel like they didn't belong, not at Harlow's, not at a restaurant named after a woman who made butter tarts in a small house in Renfrew County and who believed, with her whole heart, that a table was the most democratic thing in the world, that once you sat down together, everyone was equal, and the food didn't care who you were when you walked in. That was the whole point, really. That had always been the whole point. Camille found me near the coat check on her way out. Her mother was already in the car. She hugged me, properly the way you hug someone when you mean it, and she said quietly, I want you to know I've always known how remarkable you are, even before tonight. I hugged her back. You're going to be a wonderful sister-in-law, I said. She laughed a little. Is that still on the table? After all this? It was never off the table, I said. Come to dinner next week. Just you and Theo. Kwame's been working on a lamb dish that I think you're going to love. She said yes. She meant it. I could tell. The last guests left just after 11. Jules locked the front door. Kwame turned off the kitchen lights. Preeti gathered her things from the staff room, waved goodbye, and headed out into the snow. I sat at the bar for a few minutes with a cup of tea. Not wine, not anything fancy, just tea, and looked at the room. The tables were reset for tomorrow's lunch service. The floors were clean. The candles had been extinguished, but the ambient lighting was still on, low and warm, the way the space looked best, like something you might stumble into from the cold and never want to leave. My grandmother had a saying, which she claimed was old, but which I have never been able to source, that the person who sweeps the floor gets to decide what gets swept away and what stays. She meant it as a metaphor, but she also meant it literally because she was very practical about floors. I turned off the bar light. I put on my coat, the MEC puffer jacket, the one the hostess had assessed and found wanting, and I walked out through the front door, the same one I had been pointed away from 3 hours ago, and I stood on the sidewalk for a moment in the February cold and the sideways Toronto snow. And I thought, nothing about tonight went to waste. Not the food, which we had already arranged to donate the surplus of to a drop-in center on Sherbourne that we had a standing arrangement with. Not the flowers, which would go to a retirement home in Leslieville tomorrow morning, arranged by Jules, who had been doing this without being asked since our 2nd month of operation. Not the evening. Not even the discomfort of it, because the thing about being underestimated is that it tells you something. It tells you exactly who people are when they think the stakes are low. And that information, that clear, unambiguous information, is worth more than any seating chart or silk blouse or careful management of anyone's family. I knew who I was when I walked in. I still knew on the way out. That was enough. It had always been enough. It had always been enough.